Hello, 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 and welcome. Good evening to another episode of Potstilled Live. This week, I am, as always, joining you from the luxury confines of my apartment in Dublin, in Ireland. And this week, we're doing something a little bit different. We are, instead of our usual tack of speaking and talking to somebody from the industry about essentially the news of Irish whiskey of the week, we're going in an entirely different direction. And we're going to deep dive into what I'm calling the International Whiskey Ambassador Special. So I'm joined by three friends of mine who all work professionally as whiskey evangelists around the world, all from different backgrounds, all different nationalities, and also working with different brands in different places. So it's going to be a very, very cool show. As always, if you have any questions or if there's anything you're always been wondering about being a professional whiskey ambassador, this is your time to ask. So let me pull everyone in and welcome them to the show. Miss Tracy Franklin, Mr. Michael Egan, and Miss Claire Tesh. Welcome to the show, guys. How's it going?
Going well. Very excited to be here.
Thank you.
Great.
So I suppose it's probably a good moment for everyone to kind of introduce themselves to everyone who doesn't know. I pulled you into the show first. So why don't you give us a little background to who you are and I suppose where you are in the world right now.
Hello, my name is Tracy Franklin. I am Spirited Tracy on Instagram and around. That's basically how people see me. I am the national ambassador for Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch here in the United States of America, based in Washington, D.C. And that's about it. I love whiskey, and I tend to be a little bit theatrical because I also have a background in theater that I bring to this role.
Fantastic. Michael, do you want to jump up second there?
Yeah, of course. Michael Egan. My name is Michael Egan. I'm National Irish Whiskey Ambassador for the Kilbeggan Distilling Company. So I've been based in the US now for 7 years in Chicago and have the good fortune to travel around the States representing this fantastic portfolio of whiskey. I'm currently in Boston in my sister's basement, so I don't have the usual backdrop of my Kilbeggan portfolio.
You got great films, though.
Star Wars, yeah. So, but I do have my trusty bottle of Kilbeggan Rye with me here.
As a former resident of Philadelphia, I appreciate the Rocky Balboa poster behind you.
Yeah.
And I suppose last but most certainly not least, Ms. Claire Tesh, do you want to give us a little introduction into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm not based in the States. I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland. So I am the European brand ambassador for Angus Dundee. So we own 2 distilleries in Scotland. We have Tomintoul up in Speyside, and then I'm pointing like it's up there, but Glencadam in the Highlands. So I look after those 2 brands.
All right, and so Tracy, you're US-wide national ambassador. Michael, same for you. And Claire, you're, I suppose, EU with a little ambiguity for other Eastern markets as well, right? Perhaps.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Repeat the question. I'm just muted us. I told you I was having technical problems. Could you repeat the question, Matt? Sorry.
I said your territory is kind of EU and with a little ambiguity to go east from there if needs be, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm technically brand ambassador, but we deliberately kept it vague just in case I need to dip my toe into the Canada or States waters, or go over to Russia, etc. So we'll see how it goes. So my official title is brand ambassador.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think
we should just say global. Let's just give it to you.
Well, we have a global ambassador, but moved into for a company like us, we have 2 ambassadors, which, considering our size, we're a big bulk and blend company, but actually our release of single malts is quite small. But he's very much involved in the blending side. So I'm more involved in like the marketing side, although it's quite nice working for kind of a medium-sized company because you can kind of do bits and pieces of everything. So if you want to like do more in blending and get more experience in that, you can kind of move into that role. So I'm not global yet. If he's watching, just move on, man. Move on.
Yeah. Sorry.
I keep saying this to him.
Well, Tracy, I believe you recently took over the US national role, so maybe you can have some advice for Claire how to bump people out of seats if it comes down to it.
Right, we'll connect after.
So I suppose the whole kind of the reason of being for this episode is a lot of people ask me from my experience being a brand ambassador in the US, and then now kind of hybriding my role in sales and brand management into brand ambassador work. Essentially, what do brand ambassadors do on a day-to-day basis? And also, how did people become a brand ambassador? And then I suppose the kind of final part of what I hope to touch on a little bit as well is how people, if they're watching, also kind of look after themselves being a brand ambassador. Because I've read some articles recently with some people from the Scotch whiskey industry, which was kind of very candid in their experiences of just like trying to keep all the mental health in check and everything, because it's not a job for everyone. But I think it is a very cool industry and obviously a very sought after job as well. So I suppose we can almost start in how people got into the industry. I don't know if Claire, you're kind of last up, if you want to take this one first, how you got into the whiskey industry and being a brand ambassador.
Okay, it's a good question. I get asked this probably at every single tasting that I ever do. This comes up on how I kind of became an ambassador. And at first, I didn't include this in what I would talk about. You know, I would talk about the brand and I would talk a little bit about me, but it's never really kind of about me. And then the more I realized that actually people do want to know kind of where you came from, what's your story. So my story begins, I suppose, at university when I was a bartender. And I had alcohol in mind of a kind of career choice, but I didn't really know how to kind of go about it. And I love traveling. So I went and lived in Asia for 2 years and taught English, as everyone does. And I realized quite quickly that was not the career path for me, but it was a good opportunity to kind of travel. So when I came back, I started as a bartender again, and I worked in a gin cocktail bar in Edinburgh. And my first kind of move from working behind the bar into the other side was with a startup distillery in Glasgow. So I started in sales and marketing for them for about 2 years. And it was great because they were also producing whiskey at the same time. But their liquid was only about 2 years old. So not ready to be called whiskey yet. So then I moved from there into an ambassador role after that, naturally. I wouldn't say that for me, whiskey was never really at the forefront of where I wanted to go. Gin was very much my passion and my background, what I was comfortable in. So whiskey seemed, although I was familiar with it, being Scottish, it's kind of in your DNA a little bit, but it wasn't really something that I kind of felt that suited me. And to be honest, I only started drinking whiskey maybe 5 years ago. So I moved into being a brand ambassador role because I made the decision, actually, whiskey is a more mature category, and it seemed like the kind of career progression that I wanted to do. The brand, I worked for an independent bottler, so I've kind of spoiled for choice. So every whiskey, and just here, there, and everywhere is great because it tastes things. You just got something that kind of suits everyone. And then I wanted to learn a little bit more about distilling. I've done a few courses on distilling, but I wanted to kind of really get into it. So I left that job and moved into Angus Dundee, working for 2 distilleries. So I would say for me, it was more of a natural kind of, not luck, not kind of by accident. I definitely made these conscious decisions to move into whiskey, but it was natural for me to be a bartender and then move into that kind of way of life. I think as an ambassador, it just combines for me my 2 passions, which is alcohol and travel. So it suits me down to a tree. That's definitely roaming around, drinking alcohol. Perfect.
Are you much of a people person, Claire? You know, is it the third passion? I don't mind those people talking to.
No, I'm not good at no, I do. It's so. I think being an ambassador is so much more about representing your brand. You know, it's speaking to new people, it's speaking to bartenders, it's speaking to retailers, it's speaking to distributors, it's trying to influence here, there, and everywhere. And for me, it suits my personality. You know, I wouldn't say that public speaking was something that I was comfortable or necessarily thought that I would get involved in. But after kind of starting it does become easier. It's still something that I get nervous doing personally. And I put that down to the fact that I'm a perfectionist and I want it to be perfect every single time. And I've come to realize that, you know, sometimes it's not going to go as well as other times that you plan, and you can plan and plan and plan. But I do. People is my thing. So yes, of course, people, Matt, but alcohol and travel. At the back,
I would like to say that I'd like to think I'm friends with everyone on this chat tonight, or you perhaps wouldn't be here. So a small amount of throwing each other under the bus might happen. So, Michael, I don't know if you want to do the kind of the same question, how you ended up in booze, because as far as I understand, you're a long way from home.
I am, yeah, closer to home now than where I was yesterday. But so my path, if you like, is kind of similar to Claire. Throughout university or college back in Ireland, I did marketing and tourism in DIT, in Dublin Institute of Technology. I've always had a passion for all things Irish, first of all. So be it sport, whatever it is, everything under the Irish umbrella, I'm an advocate for. And so throughout college, I actually got a job, fortunate enough, at the Guinness Storehouse. So part-time job in college, giving tours at the Guinness Storehouse, which was the most fantastic job any college student could ask for on a
I'm going to also stop you there. It's a self-guided tour. What did you do all day?
I self-guided myself and people around me. But seriously, for anyone who's interested in the alcohol industry, likes tourism, likes Ireland, etc., lives in Ireland, the Guinness Storehouse is a fabulous place. Pouring pints up in the Gravity Bar. I fell in love with everything because you there's ample opportunity to talk about where you're from, talk about an iconic Irish brand. From there, I graduated college, and we, like yourself, Matt, Kilbeggan Distilling Company hired through the IBEC program, which is the Export Orientation Program, and we get very successful graduates out to the US to work on our brands on 18-month cycles. So I was fortunate enough to sit in on a talk with David Broderick, who used to run the program, and he offered, he pitched the placement, and of course my hand was straight up. I said, yeah, I'd love to get out to the US and work with an Irish brand, and interviewed with Cooley Distillery, Kilbeggan Distilling Company, and got a job as the Irish Whiskey Ambassador in Chicago. And then the rest is history, if you like. We were acquired by Beam Global. Cooley Distillery was acquired by Beam Global, then Beam Suntory, and now I'm representing the portfolio across the US. But we have now a team of, I'm one of 9 in America, so 8 Irish whiskey ambassadors here in the States, which is amazing.
So you'd have kind of 8 regional ambassadors, and then you'd look after kind of nationwide.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all to do with focus markets as well. So the 8 guys are doing a phenomenal job in each of their markets. So they're making my job a lot easier for sure.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. I suppose there's kind of a lot of different touch points I want to kind of come back to on that, but I definitely want to let Tracy start on how you became an ambassador before I kind of rabbit hole into other things. So Tracy, do you want to take away on your experience?
Yep, absolutely. So I fell in love with whiskey while I was actually on tour. I sing and danced in Broadway shows, toured the world singing and dancing. And for me, my voice is sensitive to alcohol, so I had to find something. So I would just like sip a horrible wine in a corner because it was low proof. And one day I discovered peated whiskey, actually. And it was such a concentration of flavor that I could have 1 or 2, be completely satisfied. The smoke would just, fill the entire room, and everyone would be like, "Oh, well, she's drinking whiskey. Great. We don't have to pressure her to take shots," which worked wonderfully for me. I would have 1 or 2 whiskeys, be able to sing the show the next day. And when I got back to New York, I went back to bartending. So I was bartending while I would audition. It's easiest. You could change your schedule, all that stuff. So once I got back to New York, I really sought out all the whiskey representatives in the city. I started going to USBG meetings that were anything with whiskey. I started really going to a lot of tastings, and then started to meet some of the actual distillers, and honestly, I just pushed my way in. That's what I did. I was like, I like whiskey. I want to drink more of it. I want to know more about it, and you're going to teach me. And they did. And as they were teaching me, they also realized because I had this theater experience, I could lead tastings, I could represent them well at different events. And so I started to get jobs representing different Scotch brands. And actually my first was Ardbeg and Glenmorangie was my first position. And I just kept working in whiskey. I would leave for a while and go and sing and dance, come back. And actually for Glenfiddich, I was bartending in Florida at a whiskey bar that I had helped open. We had 400 whiskeys behind us, and Michael, who was my brand manager, actually sat in front of me. And I took him through a flight of Glenfiddichs, and then he asked for my resume at the end.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that kind of worked out.
I made them like me.
Did you have it on you, out of curiosity? In your back pocket.
Already addressed.
Yeah.
If you just flip over your tasting mat.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
So what role was that then that you stepped into after that, Tracy? Was that the East Coast role?
Yes, so East Coast. Yes, actually based in Florida at that time, and actually no, well, I was based in Florida at that time, but they gave me the option to move. So I was going to take the Southeast, so basically from DC down, and randomly Pennsylvania. It was always so weird, but I never would have met you, so that's perfect. And I decided we should get out of Florida. So we went to Washington, D.C. and I'm there now and I love it. And now that I represent the entire United States, having the airport options in the DMV area is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, I remember like living in the States, every ambassador would live near an airline hub to whomever they had points for, which was great. People are like, well, going to go to live in Raleigh. And you're like, what? Yeah. Do you have an affiliation to Raleigh? They're like, no, just that's a Delta hub and no, it's fine. I can, so at least it works for you there.
Yeah. Quickly, it's quite a bonus when you can live near the airport.
Exactly. One question has come in, something for you guys to stew on. Wow. Jamie wants to know what dirt you have on me to throw me under the bus. So get your thinking caps on that one if you have any funny stories, because it's at least worth throwing it back if I'm going to throw it at you guys. But yeah, Michael, I wanted to ask you. I suppose now that you, have a team of ambassadors working with you in the US. I talk to a lot of ambassadors all the time that I suppose it's not really a role for everybody in the world. And I think a lot of people find it very interesting when, they ask me all the time, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but in my experiences, the people always say like, what do I need to know to be an ambassador? And I would kind of tell people it's a hell of a lot more about personality. You can learn the whiskey thing, but you can't learn to be a nice person or if you're terrified to stand up in front of 10 people, well then Whiskey Live is going to be terrifying for you. But for I suppose in your experience with working with a team of regional ambassadors, I suppose what do you guys look for or perhaps not look for in candidates, and obviously without making specific references to your candidates, if you don't want to.
Anyway, no, they're all fantastic. It's a great question and a really interesting point, because we're hiring for a jack of all trades, if you're like, within, because our roles, this morning we had an innovation pipeline call with the distillery where we're talking about potential LTOs in 2022, 23. And then the next hour you could be onto an account on or off premise, talking about case deals or how support that we can add. So, you have to have a little bit of knowledge on every area of the business, from grain to glass, if you like. So it's difficult to hire for that, especially when we're working off a graduate program where candidates are only 23, 24 years of age. So you're right, we're hiring based off of personality, and fortunately we're part of Beam Suntory, so we have a support structure in place that our incoming ambassadors, we can set them up with sales reps, with every different department, if you like, within the company, to get them up to speed on everything else. But exactly that, Matt, we're definitely looking for personality and a genuine interest in Irish whiskey in Ireland, and a very personable, you have to have, I think, an interest in the brand. If you're interviewing for a particular brand, you need to be interested in it. The history behind the Kilbeggan Distilling Company is something that is unrivaled, I think, across the board, across the whiskey category. And Irish whiskey in general is unrivaled as well. So we're simply interviewing for people who are very personable, outgoing, and who are willing to learn. If we get someone who's willing to learn, who's a hard worker, then I think they can be successful. But that's before they get to know the day-to-day of the job, which, to your point, is, it sounds all rosy when you say I travel around the States drinking whiskey and talking about whiskey, but they're long days, difficult hours, and that's the other side of the coin, if you like.
Yeah, I think one of the most amazing things when I started as an ambassador, one of the things I never really considered was that not only, I suppose, are the hiring teams looking for the personality of the candidate, sometimes you're looking for a personality fit with the market as well. Because when I moved to the States, they were like, you are like, I arrived in Pennsylvania. They're like, you're perfect for Pennsylvania. They were like, but you would have sucked in Colorado. Yeah. And they were just like, it's all cocktail focused, and you got to be fast paced, and and I was like, cool. And they're like, in Pennsylvania, they want to know more about this thing and whatnot. And I just thought like that was a very interesting dynamic, in that not only is it just the candidate, sometimes it can also be the market themselves as well. And I don't know if you experience that in any of your roles, guys, and feel free to jump in at any point.
Yeah, that's actually something we are hiring and still are hiring for Miami. So we had a hiring freeze. We had some really interesting candidates, but that's such a market that you have to have the right person. You really need to make sure that personality is going to match with the people that are there. And so that's been fun. The hiring freeze, unfortunately, due to the economy, COVID-19 and all of that, has really kind of been a step back. We did have some people in the pipeline. And I think that besides matching through personality, you just, like you said, you have to have a passion for the whiskey. That's what you're going to be drinking every day. It's what you're going to be talking about. So if you don't have a passion or even a drive to learn more about it in any way, like don't take these jobs. But also understand that there are other opportunities within these industries, within the spirits industry that aren't ambassadorship. We can get on those marketing teams. You can get on the commercial teams. You can get on the finance teams, and you still get the opportunity to be close to the whiskey, and you just do, or maybe you're doing something that's a little more suited to you. So I also stress to people, you don't have to become an ambassador, especially bartenders coming to the other side. You do not need to become an ambassador. This is not the job for everyone. And there's a lot of other opportunities.
Yeah, agreed.
So I had one question that was sent in ahead of time by actually one of the last week's hosts, Ms. Stephanie Shen. And she is a global brand ambassador of a different Irish brand. And she's actually not watching right now because she's doing an Instagram live. So she's watching back. So it's kind of one of those funny things. Is right now she's not here, but I know you'll be here, Stephanie. But she sent in a question ahead of time. And anyone listening, you can always do this for any guests we have on or any topics we're doing, if you feel like it. But so this is a question for both Claire and Tracy. Stephanie wants to know, how has your journey been as a woman working within the world of whiskey, as the general belief is that whiskey is a man's drink? I don't know. Claire?
Would you like?
Tracy?
Yeah, I'd say there are definitely it's a question I also get asked a lot, and it kind of reverts back to, you're talking about different markets, different people. I mean, there are some markets that I can go and visit and they are very much happy with me as a female ambassador, and there are markets that I go to where I am not well received at all, and they're very much not happy with me as a female ambassador. But I would say that it's an ever evolving role, and as a woman in whiskey, I mean, I do work predominantly with men, apart from the marketing team, which predominantly are female. But it is a role that's kind of changing. I think a lot more women are in the industry, and a lot more women are taking up more senior roles, more front-facing roles, more master distiller roles. But I think it is a difficult one. It's a question that, as I said, I get asked, and I kind of sit on the fence a little bit, because I do feel like there are situations, and they're down to situations in different markets where I am completely okay, and then there are other times where I need to kind of almost prove myself before I've had the chance to kind of speak about my knowledge, or I get questioned, or they'll ask if there's a man standing next to me. They'll ask the man every time, and I'm one that pain in the arse that kind of butts in, and I'm like, sorry, actually that's wrong. I'm like, this is right. And then they just look at me and I'm like, oh, I'm annoying. But you just kind of have to sometimes kind of scramble and get your kind of point put across. But I think we're definitely developing, and I notice it so much more. There's a lot more women that I meet, not just because I think it's on both sides. So in the industry, there are quite a lot of men, but also there's a lot more of my kind of friends and my colleagues and everything that are drinking more whiskey, that are women. So I am seeing some positive change, definitely. But I think we've got a long way to go before I could safely say I'm completely happy with being a woman in this industry, personally.
I would agree with that. One of the things that I didn't really mention was about 10 years ago, with a friend of mine, Jenny Wren, we started a company called Whiskey, and it was about increasing diversity in the world of whiskey. That was in New York City, and it was necessary because the tastings that we were going to, the places where we wanted to go and enjoy whiskey, were usually not filled with people who looked like us, who had the same sort of mindset as we did. And so we wanted to create a safe sort of group that was inclusive, and you could ask questions. You could really leave any event that we had feeling much more empowered to go out and order whiskey and feel comfortable being in the whiskey community. I think that was really a step in the right direction. Women in Whiskey has also been doing something similar where they get women together to create groups where they can, enjoy their whiskey without being bothered by the guy next to you going, "Oh, you're really going to drink that?" So because I still get that. Do you really drink whiskey? Yeah. What do you mean, dude? What do you mean? I'm the national ambassador.
Just back here, there's a wine glass back here for me. Don't worry about it.
What's wrong with you? So, and actually I do put in my hair, and that's why these curls come from, just in case anyone's wondering. Sorry. But I do also sometimes we don't want to focus on the fact that we are women in the industry, only because it is coming to a point where I'm in the industry. I'm a woman. This is the only experience I'm ever going to have. So we constantly talk about what it's like, but let's just get on it. Like it's getting better. I am just as educated. I am probably more passionate than most, because I'm a dork. And let's just enjoy the whiskey. Let's stop focusing on the fact that we have to struggle. Shoot, yes, there are days we have to struggle. There are days that I am not wanted in that room. There are days that I have the double whammy of being a Black woman in the room, and I'm talking about Scotch whiskey of all the whiskeys. So it just is what it is nowadays, and some days it's hard, some days it's wonderful, and I'm just really happy to be in this role as a woman of color, period. Yeah.
Fair enough. I think
you guys, you're doing a fantastic job as well.
I think there was an event that I was at probably the middle of last year, and that I was stood beside a Scotch whiskey ambassador and I'm pretty sure sales director of a Scotch company, and I had my stand and she had her stand literally right next to me, and this gentleman came over and started to ask me a question, then completely he was like, "What age are you?" No. He was like, "No, I'm not listening to you." And he moved on to her, and then I started to ask her about her whiskeys, and he was like, "No, you've no idea. Oh, screw this." And he walked off, and I was like, "The hell's his problem?" And she left me with this one bombshell of a line that kind of rocked me a little bit in my little safe little whiskey world. She turned around to me and she's like, "Well, you'll grow out of being young."
Oh,
right. And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I can see that." I mean, it was just that kind of dicky, entitled consumer, which come around one in every 100 or whatever. But it was that was kind of a bombshell line for me. That put a lot of thinking into my head, We have Jamie Cotter coming back in saying he remembers sitting in a Glasgow bar listening to a bloke lecture a female friend of his on whiskey and how she knows nothing. She turned around to him and let him know that she was the head of Glenrothes. He didn't know what to say after that. So it's there's obviously a lot of assumptions.
Oh, man.
I suppose, Tracy, just for you and me a little bit, we do have in the comments Seamus Banning saying big hello.
Hey, Seamus.
So I will in a little bit, I suppose, ask everyone kind of has a funny whiskey show related story or something that goes along. I know Michael, you probably would have heard some of the other stories that have kind of come up on the show. Don't need to come up with it right now. I'm going to give you guys time to stew on that, because everyone has something that's kind of a little bit funny, things that happen or don't happen. But actually, I think my story, Tracy, you might have actually been part of that adventure. So
I think I might know which one it is.
My one's the sneaking into a casino in Pittsburgh because I forgot my ID. So that was anyway. We'll go into that in a little bit. But
you told that one though.
Sorry,
haven't you already told that one?
I have told that one. I can tell other ones. But yeah, so I suppose one thing people always wonder is what is a day-to-day life of a whiskey ambassador? Because as I was talking to some of you guys off air earlier, no one sees, the thousands of flights a year or the 12-hour days standing behind a booth in Whiskey Live or whatnot. There's a lot of, every person in the world has a social media account where you're showing the kind of best 5% of what you're up to. And I think that has a lot to do in the whiskey industries as well. Even people within whiskey companies don't realize what whiskey ambassadors get up to in the same company. So Michael, I'm gonna throw it to you first. What is the daily life of, I suppose, from you first were regional in Chicago and now US national, like what is the day-to-day life of a Kilbeggan ambassador in the US?
So are we talking now or last year?
Right.
That's probably a good point.
Now I wake up
last year first, and then we'll revisit.
It's mad how our day-to-day has shifted. Workload has obviously lessened a little bit, but it's still a lot of work in a different area. Just on that note, though, I think the last couple of months, and unfortunately, there's never a good time for a pandemic to kick in, obviously, but it fell on St. Patrick's Day, or a lot of bars shut down the weekend of St. Patrick's Day, which is our busiest period. But so this first half of the year, and I can't believe it's the 2nd of July already, but the first half of the year has been extremely difficult for our team, for our ambassadors. But it's also given us an opportunity to identify areas that we need to work on, So is it our presence in the e-commerce world, which our team of Irish ambassadors are working with Beam Suntory now on e-commerce audits across America, across all brands, which is great. So it's a different world right now, and how we virtually interact with people and promote and talk about whiskey. But prior to, or last year, I should say, or the start of this year, the year was almost planned. I mean, it's I haven't been on a plane since March, which is unbelievable. It's like I almost my miles. I'm demoted now on my status on United. I'm like everybody else, but it's a lot of visiting markets, a lot of traveling in for pre-organized events like the Whiskey Fest that you mentioned, Matter Live, or any sort of whiskey festival, and working with our Beam Suntory team across the United States. But then it's a lot of identifying opportunities in markets where I'd leverage the local team and work with the team and identify opportunities in on or off premise accounts or non-premise accounts for events and event creation, setup and execution, which is the glamorous side of it. And it's 8 a.m., which you guys know, 8 a.m. working with reps, and then straight into evening events and presentations or seminars or dinners, etc. But then that's the glamorous side, as I said, and a large part of the job is admin and working on everything that's behind the scenes, if you like, which is the not so glamorous side of it. But yeah, that's a lot of the day-to-day is traveling and representing the portfolio and talking about our brands to various distributors, on or off premise accounts, and our sales force across the United States as well.
Question for all of you: do you ever switch off? Because that was one thing I kind of struggled with. Even one of the first things I was told moving to the States was find a bar that don't know you're a whiskey ambassador and like drink gin and tonics or something. just find somewhere to. And I remember even meeting other regional ambassadors I worked with. When we went on a fucking holiday to Charleston, and they were just they were just off, and I was struggling. I'm talking to people, and I'm like, not about products, but I was talking to people who we didn't particularly want to talk to in the first place. And the guys were like, "Yeah, Matt, whatever, you do that. We're coming over here." Yeah, and it took me a while to figure out how to stop being on all of the time. I don't know if anyone else has struggled with that, or if it's a phenomenon you've noticed at least.
Well, I think part of the problem is that you already are a person who likes to talk to people. Like, that's part of your personality. So I think one of the issues that happens is our personality is that we like people. So we've like woven it into our job as ambassador, and trying to separate this two gets a little bit difficult sometimes. Claire, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm quite lucky in that, we have certain seasons. I don't know if it's the same in the States, that the majority of our whiskey festivals will fall in under. So from beginning of September, maybe mid-August until mid of December, I know that 9 times out of 10, block that entire period off. I'm going to be traveling. If not for the whole time, then I'm back for a few days and then off again. And then when it comes to December, I think I'm like, oh, okay, I had my time now. I've done my 3 months straight. I'm going to relax. And I'm actually quite good sometimes at just saying, actually, do you know what? I'm going to switch off. But during those 3 months, if I am back home, I will be going out to other people's tastings. I will be taking, even this December, I went on holiday and I spent 5 days visiting other distilleries. Doing, but I enjoy it. So it's something that I like. And I was able to kind of switch off. But I think I have quite a good group of friends in Edinburgh that are not in the drinks industry. And then I have all my drinks industry friends. And I really enjoy spending time with them because there is no mention of my job at all. You know, they see what I'm up to in social media. They presume that I'm having the best time ever. And 9 times out of 10, I am. But as you said, they don't see the behind the scenes. So it's quite good for me to have that structure that I can kind of be like, oh, I'm going to spend time with these friends and we're not going to speak about alcohol. There's not going to be any questions directed at me about whiskey or anything else. And that's how I kind of switch off. But it took me a long time to realize that it was okay to switch off. For so long, I was just on all the time and didn't realize that I could take a break. You know, I didn't have to be sitting up at night and reading whiskey books or reading about other spirit category books. I could just watch a film and that's okay. Or if I'm in my hotel room and for some reason I'm in my bed before 10 o'clock, I can sit and watch an episode of something, you know, and that's fine. It's just that mentality of like staying on all the time. So for me, it's definitely been a journey, but I'm much better at switching off now. And lockdown has been, I have like where I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, where am I? And I'm in my own bed. And that's the biggest thing for me because I'm so used to like waking up all the time in like another city or something. So this has been a great time for me to kind of switch off a little bit more than I usually probably would.
If I can jump in, Matt, I think 2 great points. Tracy, to your point as well, like we are all extremely personable and we enjoy conversing. In saying that, if I go to a park, I'm not going to go and start striking up conversations with people, randomers, you know. But because we're in an Irish pub, or like for instance, 3 of my best friends and I went to Portugal, went to Lisbon last November just for a catch up. Just we're trying to do it once a year, and I was hell bent on either going to whiskey bars, Irish pubs. The lads didn't want to go to only Irish. I tried to convince them to whiskey bars. But it's difficult to switch off because you're curious, you're extremely interested in the industry. And especially if it's your market, so America, it's always, and this is probably me not switching off to be honest, but it's always an opportunity.
Yeah, that's not switching off, that's an excuse.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest layovers of working as an ambassador that I can't shake is when I go into a bar, I must sit at the bar, and I spend the first 3 or 4 minutes scanning everything in the bar, like back bar, POS, strip mats, and it's really weird because I walk in and my friends just kind of know that this will happen, and I'm just like they're having conversation to me, and I'm like, this is Diageo bar, okay, so that's all right. This one, and they're like, you don't work here, and I'm like, it's a good point.
It's the default thing, though.
Yeah,
it is. In every single bar, I do the same thing. First thing I do is scan the back bar, and then I almost take it a personal insult that they don't have my product. And then in some bars, I'm like, why would they have my product? You know, unless one of my team has gone into this bar and actually sold to them, how would they get hold of this? But for some reason, I'm like, oh, I can't believe they've not got my. This is absolutely shocking. My friends are like, calm down. Like, it's a gin bar. They've got 1 bottle of whiskey behind the bar. You need to just calm down. But I think it's just drilled into you, especially if you've worked in the on-trade. If you've done an on-trade role where you've had to go around bars and try and sell your product, then it's drilled into you to look at the back bar, look at, as you said, the point of sales, and see menu listings. And I think that is difficult because you work in everyone goes to bars to kind of switch off and relax, while as alcohol is very much part of our lives. So it can be difficult to switch off on that side of things, I think.
To flip that as well, if I walk into a bar, regardless of where we are in the world, or especially in America, and there's a bottle of Kilbeggan Rye or Potstilled or any of our brands, I'm over the moon. It's like it's a win, and I'm like, this is yes.
Somebody did their job.
Or I'm sure you guys have been sitting at a bar and like in January, I remember someone ordered a pot still, or I saw a bartender taking down Kilbeggan pot still and pouring it to a guy over the other side of the bar. And I mean, if I worked for a bigger brand in the Irish whiskey industry, that wouldn't be something new. You know, it wouldn't be something that you see regularly. But this is quite rare. So I'm looking, and I'm forced to walk around the bar and go and introduce myself and at least talk to that person. And that's probably our role, you know, that's the connection that you have with the brand, and you feel obligated to go and do that. In actuality, you're probably annoying this couple that are enjoying a drink.
I mean, but you probably bought it for them, right?
I did, yeah. I bought like
so you can say hi.
one for myself and Kristen, and one for that couple, yeah.
Well, to flip that on you, I took a weekend away. I got kind of a voucher or whatever. I went into the K Club, kind of a very posh golf course and old castle and whatnot, and I'm like, this is gonna be great. Got this nice present, gonna go down here, gonna do nothing but relax, gonna be great. So I sat at the bar one night and I'm just ordering random Irish whiskeys, right? And and somebody comes up to me and was like, hi, and it turns out it's a different person from the Irish whiskey industry who I know that saw just somebody repetitively ordering good Irish whiskeys, that they were like, who the fuck is this person? So it wasn't their brand, but they were like, I'm gonna have to figure out who this is. Yeah. It's like, hey,
and how do I get in on this?
Yeah. I apologize for not being a consumer. Yeah, so Dara Daly dropping in from Massachusetts, saying he always checks cocktail menus to see what they're using. That's a good cheat sheet as well. Jamie dropping back in on what you were saying there, Michael. He's not supposed to speak to randomers in parks about his products. This is an interesting question, and probably put you on the spot a little bit. So Jeff asking, or I suppose writing in from Minnesota, saying, is there anything that you dread about being an ambassador? Probably not about the actual, like, you know, your role, but is there anything in the realm that you kind of roll your eyes at, perhaps when you kind of come across it? Obviously, we want to keep things positive, but I'm sure there's pet peeves for everyone.
I'll go. Expenses. Oh my God, I absolutely hate expenses so much. It is the worst thing.
So many. You don't understand, like, because the people in the office always try to talk about how they have to do their expenses, and you're like, are you kidding me? I have like 15 to 20 charges a day. Yeah. Because you've got all of the airplane, you've got the snack, you have the coffee, you've got all the drinks, you've got the taxi, it's absurd.
And it is such a nightmare, and especially when they're all in a different language that I can't read. I'm like, so then I have to work out, okay, 12 o'clock, maybe breakfast or lunch? I don't know. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, what's the next one? No idea. So then I have to work back. And it is a nightmare, because you've got so many receipts that you need to, and I don't know about you guys, but I work on a receipt, so I keep them all. I don't have an app, which would probably be a lot more handy, but I keep the physical receipts for our company, and it is just a nightmare. And especially because if you don't get on top of them, you've got like 2 or 3 months to do in the one, and you're just sitting there like, so many receipts out my desk, just trying to work through it.
Are you not allowed to use an app? Is that or is that a personal choice? Please tell me, because the app is like, what's the reason for this?
We're quite a traditional company, so I think an app would probably be a bit too much for them to handle. And we work on a paper basis, and that's kind of easier. But yeah, it's just, I dread that so much. It's probably the only thing, to be honest, that I dread. But that, for me, it's the first thing I think of. Expenses.
It's the worst day.
Which, 3 months behind.
Absolutely the worst day of the month.
One day? That's all you do? One day?
Well, the thing was, everyone I've ever worked with was like, just do your expenses in small, regular blocks, and they never pile up. And I'm like, yes. And then it's like, Matt, your expenses are due tomorrow. I'm like, fuck.
Email talking, but Claire, I feel for you having multiple currencies and languages and having to deal with that.
And
no app and paper.
Sometimes, oh my God, sometimes I'll go into a tiny little town in Germany and I'll say, and in Germany, you have to use cash. They don't like cards. So that's a big thing for me. So I'm like, oh, for God's sake. And I'll go in and I'll say, look, I just want a sandwich. And I'll say, can I get a receipt? Don't do receipts. I just need anything that says that I've got this sandwich. Don't do it. So then I'm like a paper. At one point, someone gave me a paper napkin with the word sandwich, €4. I was like, you know what? I'll take it. Fair enough.
Wow.
I had a trip once where I went through Russia, South Korea, and Japan in the same trip. And I came back, and then basically we all agreed that and I'm the same as Claire. I no longer have a Concur app. My credit card doesn't have an option to go back to an app. Like they're not compatible for some reason. So it's paper receipts. And like, I just did 6 weeks in the US. I had so many hotel envelopes stuffed full of receipts. But I had these 3 different illegible languages. And when I got back after the trip, basically everyone internally agreed. They were like, okay, if you can do it out, we'll just basically have to agree on this. And okay. Then I got freaking audited, and the auditors were like,
oh no.
And you're like, no. Okay. And I had one down that was listed as like transport, and I had to call up like the Irish consulate in Japan. I'm like, can you guys translate this for me? And they were like, you apparently at 9 a.m. bought a sushi ball. And I'm like, that's transport. Yeah. Great.
Wow. Yeah, so I have Concur for my app. There was something else I used previously that I don't remember now. What about you, Mike?
Well, I'm over the moon now that Concur have linked up with Uber and linked up with various other companies to export or to directly import your expenses in, and receipts are there. So, Claire, you need to get on this quick.
I absolutely do. I do. Do you know what? I didn't, up until maybe a year and a half ago, I didn't have an app for storing all of my flight and travel information. I
like
know.
You mean?
No, like like an iPhone calendar. No. Yeah. So I can look at my day and be like, oh, okay, today I'm going to this town in Italy, and tomorrow I have a flight out back to Germany. Okay, that's cool. And I'm staying in this hotel. Well, I have no idea how I managed to survive before about a year and a half ago. I also agree with that. It was Juliet in Glenallachie, she was like, what's your next flight? And I'm like, scrolling through emails, and she was like, what are you doing? No, you need this. And it has been a lifesaver. That is, yeah, absolutely. And it's also a Concur app as well.
Yeah, I liked it because I could send it. My husband was connected, so he could see where I was. So even more than me looking at it, he actually knew what was happening. So if anything went wrong, or if that was really helpful. It sent him when like my flight was going to be late, stuff like that.
That's good. Yeah, nice. It's good like that. That's handy.
So I suppose, guys, have we thought about our little mishaps question or funny stories from being an ambassador? If anyone wants to jump in on those, I've got some prompts from people trying to get me to oust me on some of my funny stories. But does anybody want to take the lead, or I can throw one out there and see if it kind of lubricates any wheels?
I have one that will always stick with me, and I'm forever grateful to this man. It was my first year, maybe 18 months into my role, or not even, to be honest. It was December, and we were at Whiskey Fest, New York City, and we had, I don't know if you guys remember, but Beam Global used to run the Great Whiskey Debates, which were amazing. It was a representative from Irish, Scotch, bourbon, and Canadian. Different distilleries, different brands debating against each other with a moderator. And we had, at Whiskey Fest New York, we had a crowd of about 250. And to say I was nervous is a complete understatement. I was probably 25. And on the panel, representing Lefroy was Simon Brooking, who's our national Scotch ambassador, legend. We had Dan Tulio representing Canadian Club, who's a legend within the whiskey industry. Fred No, master distiller of Jim Beam, all right, sitting next to me, and then myself. And I met the lads. Well, I knew Dan. I didn't travel a lot with Fred around the US, so I met Fred for the first time beforehand, but knew he was this iconic figure within US whiskey and global whiskey. And so anyway, we're in the room with about 250 people, and some fella who I still remember exactly what he looks like. And when I see him one day, I'll say to him, ask me a really, really technical question around even deeper than the pH levels of the water that we use in both distilleries and how it impacts the finished product, whatever the question was. And I basically sunk into my chair and I said, I don't know how am I going to get out of this one now? I can't bullshit him. And as I'm about to pick up the microphone to answer, didn't know what I was going to say, Fred took the microphone off me and basically didn't berate the guy, but he called him out for asking a technical question like that when he was like, don't be asking that. And he basically saved me from whatever was going to happen. And I was just over the moon. And I was looking at him going, I have so much respect for you. So that's a story that will always stay with me, because it harkens back to our team of ambassadors that are in the States right now. None of us know everything about everything to do with our portfolio and our brands, and we're always learning. And I guarantee you the guy that asked that question was the same type of person that we were speaking about earlier on. You know, someone that was just portraying that they know a lot more than they probably do. And I was so grateful for Fred for answering that, and I'll never forget it. So.
Oh, the relief you must have felt.
Oh my
I thought
God.
you were going to say, like, someone said, and that's it, over. Thanks for everyone for joining.
But even better, Fred now saved the day.
Yes.
I love that.
I like, it's one of those people that makes a statement in the form of a question. They're always the best participants in which let me make this really elaborate statement and then put a question mark at the end.
Show how smart you are.
Exactly. Anything coming to mind, Claire?
I feel like I'm quite accident prone when I travel. So if something's going to happen, it's going to happen to me. I had quite a I'll say funny-ish incident that happened. This was last year, at the end of last year, and I did something ridiculous. I did like 2.5 months. So I hadn't been back to Scotland. So I had my laptop, and my laptop was, for some reason, it just wasn't working properly. And my usual kind of, I'm going to apologize, but I'm not very IT savvy, but my usual protection was for the laptop, as in like pop-up protection and stuff that I had, didn't work. So I arrived in, I think I was in maybe the Netherlands or Belgium, I can't remember which country. And I went into my hotel and I checked some emails. I noticed something like weird pop up, but I just clicked off it, went to bed. Anyway, I got driven out the next morning for a tasting. And they said to me, like, oh, it'd be quite good if you kind of use your PowerPoint to show like the pictures and the videos and stuff, just to kind of make it a little bit more visual for other people. I was like, absolutely, yeah. So I get up in front of 25 people and I've got the laptop on and I'm plugging away. And within about half an hour, they were all just looking at the screen, and I was just like, and I'm facing them and I'm not looking at the screen. And I turn around and there's a pop-up that says, click here for naked ladies. And I was like, oh my God. So I like tried to click off the pop-up ad, which fueled the laptop to go into absolute meltdown, and all the pop-ups you've ever seen. There is so many. And I just had no idea, because I'd obviously picked up a virus, but I didn't realize that I had it. So I just shut the laptop down and I was like, right, I'm going to try and approach this a little bit more. But that was probably the one of the funniest moments that stands out for me, was the dread and fear that filled me when I realized that I had pop-ups coming up during a tasting.
I love it. I don't really have anything that fun. I mean, I just feel like it's all just like last minute feats of like terror because things aren't there. And so I guess, yeah, so last year's Whiskey Fest. So last year we launched the Glenfiddich Grand Cru. So I was doing a lot of tastings all within the last October, November, December. It's all about celebration. So we're doing a lot of fine dining, luxury accounts, and the Whiskey Fest was also scheduled during this period. So I was coming from a training that I had earlier in the day, Meatpacking District, and heading over to Times Square. And I arrive and we've hired a few people to be there to run the table with us. And I only have half an hour because I'm basically like just coming for the VIP portion. Because I have to go to another tasting with like Rob Report. And so I arrive and I'm like, okay, great. Why isn't anything set up? Like we've got half an hour. What's going on? And they're like, we don't have anything. So we just got this empty bar. It's like, what do you mean? They're like, we don't have any product. So we're half an hour to the start. We have that much product. Like literally, I have like a little like bottle in my bag of Grand Cru that I was gonna like pour out for some of the VIPs. And we are like hectically on the phone, scrambling to find products to get to. So we have to get both Balvenie and Glenfiddich, completely set it up, plus our VIP pours. So like it was an absolute disaster. But know that the back, like the inners of the Marriott Marquis, actually not people were like pressed against the walls as we were running as quickly as we could out to the bottom to open the gates to get these boxes that we had just ordered. Like literally, we just called like one of our favorite off-premise accounts and said, we need whatever you got. Please send us anything you got. And we just like ran and got the bottles. And literally as people were walking up going, what's your oldest? What's your VIP? And we're like, what are you talking about? What? Oh yeah, no problem. Let me see. What have we got here? I think maybe, yeah, it was.
But that happens regularly because we launched, Matt, I don't know if Fernand O'Connor ever told you, but when he was at Tales of the Cocktail in 2017, we launched Kilbeggan Single Grain. And it was a huge setup and it was going to be a big event and everything was set up. It was amazing. And we said, right, let's get the product loaded up, the case of whiskey. And who has them? I don't know. The local team, they didn't have them. Completely lost. So we had the whole Beam team in New Orleans, our advocacy team basically, whom I'm sure you know a lot of them, cabbing around to every liquor store in the first quarter and beyond, trying to buy every bottle of Kilbeggan. It worked. The biggest scramble that we've ever had.
We always make it work though, and that's what I love about this role. Like we are problem solvers.
Yeah.
We will get it. It doesn't matter how, but it will shine by the end of the evening. Period.
Michael, I was at that Tales.
You were at that?
I was. No, I had an unfortunate. I've just made this worse by being vague about this.
Right?
It was weird. I was trying to blow this off, and I've just made it really weird. To mellow the tone, I got roofied at that Tales and ended up in hospital.
Remember that?
I missed like and it was weird because I booked like everything I had booked and wanted to see was in like the final 2 days, and it was just like written off for me, unfortunately. So yeah, that'd be watch who's handing you drinks, and that was that was that on the scale of ambassador stories. That was one of my worst ambassador stories. But to lighten it up a bit, I see Jamie has an analogy in there as well, or a little story. He said in a Milan masterclass with a few hours notice and no translator and no prep, he thought he'd use Google Translate to give a few words in Italian. And he said he unfortunately hit Spanish rather than Italian, and he didn't notice until about 15 minutes in when it was pointed out to him. And I had something similar on that Asia trip I talked about. I had a mistranslated business card in Korean. That was great. I got a Korean American friend of mine to translate it for me because we didn't have a Korean contact at the time. And I was, instead of an export sales manager, I was the manager of a takeaway. And then on so check translations. Then in Japan, I stood up, and in Japanese, I thought it'd be cool. I'm like in transition year, and like when I'm like 16 in school, I took like a year of Japanese. I was like, I got this. I'll do the introduction in Japanese. It's fine. Don't even worry about it. But I didn't realize that the company name or the company I work for, their name when you pronounce it, I suppose in Japan, it means please don't cry. Like it's to plead with somebody, to like begging somebody not to cry. So the whole room like burst out laughing.
Wow.
Then to make that worse, I left out a word in that it like that happened and it threw me. So my next line was meant to be like, and I'm from Ireland, which is Watashi wa Irlando gin des. I forgot the word gin because the whole room was in stitches. Instead of saying I am from Ireland, I said I am Ireland. Equally hilarious to everybody in the room. So
I'm Ireland.
Yeah, just me. Nobody else. And then to top that one off, I basically I learned that in Japan in some ways they can be known for being kind of monolingual or perhaps shy to try English if they're not fluent. And so I learned the phrases. Our importer kind of taught me how to say, "My name is, I am from." And I make this whiskey in the most basic form, like I'm with this whiskey brand. And this group of Asian businessmen walk up, and I said, "My name is," and they went, "Uh-huh." And then I said, "I'm from Ireland." They went, "Ah, okay." And then I said, "I make this whiskey." And one of my buddies had just had them at his stand, and he was walking by, and he hears me speaking Japanese, and then and he walked by and he goes, "They're Canadian, Matt. They don't speak Japanese." I turned around and was like, "You guys speak English?" They were like, "Oh, thank God." They were like, "We couldn't deal with the Japanese."
Amazing.
But they didn't even interrupt me. They all said, "Ah."
Oh, they're so polite. I love it. A friend of mine said that I think he was in Russia and he was saying that he had a tasting and a translator, and he told a couple of jokes and the translator would obviously translate, and they got a couple of laughs. So he was like, right, this is going quite well. I'm going to introduce a few more, because usually when you've got the translator, it's a bit stop-start, it can be a difficult rhythm. So he was like, I'm going to introduce more. So he started introducing more jokes, and they started laughing again. So he was like, God, got to the end. He was like, that might have been one of the best tastings that I've ever done. Like, the crowd were absolutely loving it. So there's, I think, one English speaker in the crowd. So he went up to the end and said, look, that was a really good tasting. I thought it went really well. And he was like, yeah, it did. He's like, the crowd were loving it. All my jokes, they all got them. I thought it was great. He's like, well, every time you told a joke, the translator would say, this is a joke, just laugh.
Oh.
Poor guy. Confidence.
Well, I've had a number of experiences presenting with translators across different markets, and the thing that drives me, like sometimes you do a really short sentence and they go on talking for like 7 minutes, and you're like, what are you saying? What is this? And then the worst is when you have a really long sentence and they're like, and you're like, no, that was like 9 minutes worth of material. What? How did you explain that? Or the worst is you're like, well, this is our brand. It's in a sherry cask, and they translate, and the whole room starts laughing. I'm like, no, what was the joke?
Yeah.
What was funny about that sentence?
Yeah.
Or some of when I've done translations before, they've said I've said the line, and they've said, as you said, like a big long sentence, and I'll say another line, and they'll say, I've already told them that. Well, why am I here? He's just off on one. I'm like, oh, right, okay. I mean, he's great, but still.
I had a couple of events in bars where we had the translator set up or whatever, and I'm standing in this room full of people that don't speak English, and I'm there and pontificating, glass in hand, and then I turn to the translator, and he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, I wasn't listening. What did you say?" And I'm like, that was like a 7-minute monologue, and I was really, and then I'm like, all right, hang on, let's just quietly over, like, let me just explain this again. And then he was like, yeah, okay, I got it, yeah. And then the same thing, like the next night, he was like talking to someone, looks back, and he was like, I wasn't listening at all. What? Yeah, okay, yeah, got you. Same thing. Yeah, okay, got you.
There's a book that I have, well, 4 or 5 of them, but an Irish book called Overheard in Dublin. Matt, I'm sure you've read it. And it's just quality, funny stories of conversations that people have heard on buses, on trains, on the loo, whatever it is. And I'd be flying around America reading this and just cracking up to myself on the plane. But I've often thought that there should be one outlet for brand ambassadors to share funny stories, because everybody has dozens and dozens, whether it's on a work. We originally laughed about it being called Overheard on a work with, and just the random things you hear which is a strange experience, because you're from 8 a.m. to 5, whatever it is,
Oh,
never met, and we'll probably never meet again. And some of the things that you hear in the stories that they share are priceless. That I wish there was a place we could send them and it was published.
Amazing. Right.
Cross brands, obviously, and portfolios and countries, but it would just be comical.
What's the book called? I'm going to get it.
It's called Overheard in Dublin.
Right.
So there's also Overheard in New York.
Is there?
Yeah, that's a New York City one. Yeah.
No way. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's in New York.
Get two of those.
Just on your work with point, like work with, for people that don't know, you literally as an ambassador brought and plonked in front of a sales rep who brings you to a load of their accounts to try to sell in your products for the day. And I had one in a non-English speaking market recently, and pretty much everything I was selling was in sherry casks. And what was really weird was the client that we went to see spoke more English than the sales rep I was with. So they did kind of an exchange in the native tongue. And then the client was like, cool. So he just kind of gave me a background on the products. And I'm like, that's helpful. Yeah, perfect. And he was like, so he was like, cool. So like, tell me more about port pipes.
Oh,
and I'm like, I mean, I can tell you about port pipes. I'm not particularly sure why I would tell you about port pipes. Like I have a range of sherry cask whiskeys here. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, but like, what specifically do you like about port? And I'm like, lots. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, God.
We over the start of the day, so you could kind of rectify that.
Yes, exactly.
We set up a group chat last January, I think it was. What similar to like things that you overhear, things the funniest thing people say at whiskey festivals. And a friend of mine from Arran, I don't know why I found this one so funny, but he was at a festival and a guy came up, kind of the guy that would have asked you your question at the festival and said, oh, what's this? And Andy was explaining it, and he said, oh, what's the fermentation time for this? And Andy said, oh, I don't know, 55 hours or something. And the guy picked it up and he smelled it and he put it back down again. And he smelled it again, put it back down. Then he tasted it and he was like, I think it's longer. And I just walked away. And Andy was like, get tea!
Oh, no.
Oh my God!
Turn that into a book, though. You've got a winner there, I think, Michael.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, just quality stories.
Oh, your best Irish Scotch. Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. But yeah, guys, I suppose we're kind of running down the time a little bit. So before we go, I suppose if I'll kind of go around the clock a little bit, but if you were to meet somebody that was, impassioned and wanted to get into the whiskey industry, be it an ambassadoring or into marketing or sales or whatnot, what would be your advice for, I suppose, people who want to generally go about and kind of attempt to achieve that? Tracy, I don't know if you want to start off.
Sure. I mean, my recommendation would be to just start going to tastings, to talk to the people that are hosting, the people that are setting up, to go to whiskey festivals, all of that, and just start talking to the people that are actually involved in presenting. And there are opportunities that come about where you need somebody in local markets, where you would just call someone that you trust, pursue all of that knowledge about the brands, and really you'll find one that kind of speaks to you, that you feel in alignment with a company or specific whiskey. And then that I think then you'll kind of know what pursuit you want to take, and then get to know the people that are representing them, the people that are already working in that brand, that company. And that's really how I kind of made my way into where I was. And I think anyone, honestly, it's about relationships. This whole industry is really about building relationships. So that's what I would recommend.
I like it. Michael, any advice?
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think it's all in the name. We're brand ambassadors, not category ambassadors. So if you're a fan of whiskey or Irish whiskey, it doesn't mean that you'll make a great brand ambassador. It's important to know where you want to go, where not physically or geographically, but what direction you want to go in, what brand you want to work with, what those brand values are and what they stand for, and make sure that you or try and align with them. And it's difficult if you don't align already to force yourself to do so. But yeah, to your point, Tracy, attend competitive or any tasting seminars and ask, go to the distillery, apply for various, if there's graduate programs that we work off of, apply. And we interviewed recently, and there's been people who have interviewed 3 times for the role. And that's really impressive. I think that there's a never give up attitude, that this is something I want to pursue and do in my career, and there they are following up on that, which is great.
I like it, and that's a serious I suppose resolve to go back there again the third time.
Yeah.
Is it a yearly interview that it occurs, or
it's so Matt, you were on this program, right? The IBEC program. Yeah. So it's 18 months. So our graduates come out on 18 visas, but it's a program called the Export Orientation Program, run through IBEC, which is the Irish Business and Employers Confederation. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it depends per company when they hire, essentially what their needs are. But the kind of cool thing about being 18 months is you can kind of stagger and roll it. And it was funny because when I went in, the group before me was a group of like 12, and the group after me was a group of 7. But when I went in, they only needed 1. So it rolls in way, and sometimes it's 2, and so it depends how big the company is. Like Kilbeggan might need 7 new ambassadors, whereas a different company might only need 1. But when you've the likes of 7, the 18 months kind of gives you that extra time to have a lot of overlap, and the ones who've been there the longest can kind of teach the youngest, and then when the eldest leave, then the youngest is now kind of the top dog, and they kind of help that way. And one of the most annoying things I had when I first started was that everyone kept telling me, I'm like, what do I do? And everyone's like, well, every market's different. And then I'm like, this is the worst answer ever. Someone just tell me, what is my day-to-day job? They're like, well, every market's different. And then when the final group came in before I left, they're like, what's my day-to-day job? And I'm like, well, every market's different.
Yeah. There you go. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, because I can't tell, Dara in Massachusetts what he's supposed to do in Massachusetts. I have absolutely no idea what the goals are, the counts are like, and also franchise state to controlled states, or if I'm talking to the guys in Russia, like, that's an entirely different job depending on what the local market needs are. So
and again, everybody brings different talents to the table as well. Like Dara, for example, is a rock star in the cocktail world, and he's pioneering that with us right now. But you could, and it also depends on your support structure in your market as well. If you have a team of sales reps, distributors that are heavily involved, then it's going to make your day-to-day a lot more structured and therefore more productive, I think.
Yeah. So Claire, any advice for anyone who wants to jump into the Scotch whiskey industry?
Yeah, I think I would echo what both Michael and Tracy said, in that I suppose just be comfortable in yourself, kind of find out which brands, as Tracy said, that you want to work for. And just for me, I think it's just all about education, going to visit other people's tastings, going to visit other spirit category tastings. You can pick up so many little nuggets of information, maybe not just from your category, but from gin or rum. And I think just having a passion and letting that shine through in a natural way. I know that sounds quite cheesy, but you kind of have your own personality and flair that you can bring to the table. And I think as long as you can express that and the brand that you want to represent, then you've got kind of a shot at being a brand ambassador.
Yeah, I like attending other people's tastings, if not for the pure, like, trying to learn more. People have a way of explaining things differently than I do. And sometimes I hear somebody like take a complicated topic and break it down so easy. And I'm like, oh, I've explained this 300 times and never done it so well. You're like, stealing this.
Yeah. Yep, definitely.
I think we're kind of coming to an end. One I'll just kind of throw out. Jeff Humphreys coming in again saying, any tips about talking about a brand and posting on socials without overdoing it or coming across as annoying? And I think that kind of works from both an enthusiast point of view and also kind of a professional point of view, or someone trying to become a professional. I'm sure there's a lot of kind of things that you can certainly annoy a brand, or you annoy other people who are, I suppose, in the industry, or just enthusiasts as well. Anyone have any thoughts on that before we can kind of wrap up? It's just a question thrown out.
It's a very good question. I think for me, I try and make it for social media fun. And usually that kind of, for the people that would usually get annoyed, say it's my friends that maybe follow me on social media that, are not that involved in whiskey or don't want to see my posts every day. But if there's something kind of fun about it, then they're almost willing to forgive the fact that I've got the whiskey post. So I think maybe try and make it, if you can, fun. And that kind of appeases some of the people that might find you annoying.
Yeah, I think it's about value added. So it's maybe not just completely all about that specific brand, but something that maybe is category wide or something that ties into your personal life. There's lots of ways to talk about specific whiskeys that doesn't necessarily all revolve around that whiskey, how it was aged, how long it, so really thinking outside the box of how you can relate that to your life or to the category as a whole.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you. It's two prongs, right? If you want to follow the brand, you can follow the Instagram handle or the Facebook handle and know everything behind the brand itself or the portfolio that you're representing. If you're following the ambassador, you're getting to know them inevitably as a human being and their life and what their values are. They happen to work for a whiskey or a spirits company. So I definitely try and balance, even though I know I need to get better on social media, I definitely try and balance both work and personal posts. But it's a conversation that we're currently having, where you guys are probably having it as well with your organizations and your teams, because we're so reliant on social media right now and virtually interacting with people. So from a big company standpoint, what if Beam Suntory, there's legalities around what you can and can't post, and so I just try and post as much authentic content as possible.
Cool. Well, guys, I appreciate your time. If you want to give a quick shout out to any socials that people should check you out on before we go, that'd be pretty cool. And then I think we're probably about to wrap up. As I said, tonight intentionally had no sponsors because you guys are going from such a different type of background.
We have our whiskey.
But Claire, if people want to kind of follow your ambassadoring online, where should they be checking you out?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram on Whiskey Tester.
All right. And Michael?
It's michael.egan88 on Instagram or Egan Whiskey on Twitter.
Nice and simple. I like it.
88. Spirited actually _ Tracy with an IE on Instagram. That's really where I'm most active. I think I have Twitter as well, but
are you still doing semi-daily jokes, Tracy, as well?
I still do my spirited shenanigans. Yes, they are not always daily. I feel like with all that's going on, sometimes I need to include some information that's actually going to help change society as well. So I intersperse my shenanigans with a little bit of life lessons, I guess.
Fair enough. Well, to all of you guys in all of your different time zones, I very much appreciate it. To everyone who's tuned in and watching back, I very much appreciate it. And everyone asks questions. You guys are rock stars. So, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to sharing a drink with you soon.
Yeah.
Yes,
meet you all.